My name is Tasha, and I was 30 years old when my fiancé looked me dead in the eye and said, "Let's be real. This house is mine. You just live here." He said it like he was reading the back of a cereal box, completely unfazed. We were standing in the kitchen I helped rebuild, tile I laid myself, the cabinet doors I painted, the drawer that only slides because I fixed it. He said that line while eating toast on the bar stools I found secondhand. I had just asked if we should start the process of putting both of our names on the deed now that we were engaged. And that was his answer. Not a joke, not a pause, just a casual reminder that I was living in his house, playing housewife in a home I didn't legally exist in. I didn't cry. I didn't get angry. I didn't even speak. I just smiled, nodded, and finished wiping the counter. But something inside me clicked. I realized in that moment that he never saw me as an equal. I was a placeholder, a helper, someone useful but never essential. I didn't yell. I didn't storm out. I played it cool, because if this was how he wanted to play it, I could play too. Quieter, smarter, and much more permanent. But before I tell you how I flipped everything on him without raising my voice, let me know where you're watching from and hit like if you've ever been made to feel like a guest in your own life, because this story is about taking your name back. That night, I laid in bed beside him like nothing happened. His arm was draped over my waist like always, but I stared at the ceiling until the sun came up. I thought about all the weekends I spent repainting walls, the nights I stayed up organizing the garage, the mornings I watered the grass while he slept in. I thought about how often he referred to things as his car, his house, his money, even though I split groceries, paid half the bills, and cleaned up after every dinner party we hosted together. He had always framed things that way. I just hadn't noticed it until now. Or maybe I noticed and didn't want to believe it. That was the real betrayal. It wasn't just the house. It was the realization that I had spent 3 years building something that was never really mine. The next morning, I made breakfast like usual. I asked him how work was going, kissed him on the cheek, then casually brought up the mortgage. "Hey, what's the name of the lender again? I want to look into some of those property tax deductions you mentioned." He didn't even blink, told me the name, then went back to scrolling his phone. That was all I needed to get started. While he played video games or went to the gym, I started digging. I went through drawers, looked at statements, scanned documents into my phone when he wasn't home. He wasn't careful. He never assumed I was looking. That was his mistake. I learned everything. The mortgage terms, the balloon payment due in 6 months, the fact that the loan wasn't locked in, and, most importantly, the fact that his name was the only one on every piece of paperwork. No co-signer, no second applicant, just him, which meant if something went wrong, no one else could step in. Unless, of course, someone knew how to play the long game. I wasn't just going to walk away. I was going to take the house. Not by screaming, not by begging, by understanding the fine print better than he did. He never noticed the shift in me. That's the thing about men like him. They think control is loud, obvious, thunderous, but the most dangerous decisions are the ones made in silence. I found out he was behind on a payment. Just one. Small. Manageable. But it told me everything I needed to know. The mortgage was vulnerable. I started keeping tabs on his habits. How often he drank. How often he ignored the bills I left on the counter. How many times he said, "I'll get to it," and never did. He was too comfortable. He assumed permanence. But the truth was, he was too careless to keep what he didn't respect. I opened a savings account in my own name. I started working late on purpose to earn extra. I sold a few personal things. Nothing major, just enough to move money without it raising alarms. I reached out to an old college friend who worked in real estate and started asking questions. Not as a buyer, but as someone who might, theoretically, want to assume a mortgage from someone else. The process was slower than I wanted, but I kept smiling at him, kept playing the part, kept pouring his coffee and asking how his fantasy league was going. Meanwhile, I was building my own fantasy, one where my name wasn't just on the deed, it was on everything. The first major break came 2 weeks later. I found a legal loophole in the mortgage agreement, a transfer clause, one that, under the right pressure, would allow the loan to be reassigned. It wouldn't be easy, it wouldn't be cheap, but it was possible. And once I saw that, I knew exactly how I'd get out. Not with a suitcase, with a signature. We met when I was 26, fresh out of grad school, new to the city, clinging to a low-paying nonprofit job, and a shared apartment with a shower that coughed every morning like it had asthma. I wasn't looking for anyone. I was just trying to survive. Then there was Marcus. 6 years older, already established, working in tech, confident in a way that made everyone else seem like they were faking it. He was magnetic. The type of man who never checked his bank account balance before a date, who called his mom twice a week but still had tattoos. He said things like, "I want to build something real with you," and made it sound like a promise. For the first time in my life, I let myself believe I could relax into someone else's care. We moved in together a year later. His condo, not mine. At the time, it didn't seem like a red flag. He said it made more sense. No rent, no lease, more space. He even let me decorate. gave me a paint budget, told me to make it feel like us. And I did. I chose the paint. I picked out throw pillows. I added plants and curtains and warmth. But slowly, that us became his. His hallway, his dishes, his thermostat. He'd say things like, "Don't mess with the AC, I've got it set how I like it." Or, "Let me handle the plumber, this stuff's under my name." It was subtle at first, then it was constant. Anytime I challenged it, he'd pull me in close and say, "Baby, I didn't mean it like that. You know this is our home." And every time I'd believe him, because I wanted to. I told myself it was a phase, that men say stupid things, that we'd figure it out after the wedding. I even joked with friends about getting a prenup, not because I had more, but because I had less and needed protection from my own heart. What I didn't tell them was that Marcus never asked me what I wanted. He just assumed I'd fall in line. When we got engaged, it wasn't a question. It was a presentation. He picked the ring. He picked the photographer. He picked the restaurant. All I had to do was cry and say yes. And I did, because I thought this was just what grown-up love looked like. A little bit of control, a little bit of surrender. But even in our happiest moments, I always felt like I was catching up, like he was 10 steps ahead of me, financially, socially, emotionally. I thought that meant I was lucky, that I should be grateful he chose me, that being included in his life was better than building my own. It's embarrassing now to admit how many times I shrank myself to keep the peace. How many times I let him win arguments just because I didn't want to be difficult. How often I downplayed my career, my ideas, even my dreams, because he never really asked about them. He never said I couldn't succeed. He just made sure his success was always louder. I once got offered a promotion at work that would have required travel. Nothing major. Just a few overnight trips a month. I was ecstatic. I told him over dinner, expecting support. His response? "Well, who's going to take care of things here while you're gone?" Not congratulations. Not, "I'm proud of you." Just logistics. Just inconvenience. I turned the offer down the next morning. I told myself it was the right thing, that timing wasn't right, that stability mattered more. But deep down, I knew I said no because I was already trained to put his comfort above my own ambitions. He never had to say the words. The message was clear. This is my world. You're just visiting. So I stopped dreaming out loud, stopped applying for things, stopped asking for more. And when he started talking about our future, buying a bigger house, maybe moving to the suburbs, starting a family, I followed the script. I smiled. I nodded. I planned my life around him. That's what made the house comment so sharp, because it wasn't just about the walls. It was about the years I'd given up trying to prove I belonged somewhere he never planned to share. That comment wasn't a slip. It was the quiet truth finally showing its teeth, and it made everything snap into place. The ring he picked without asking, the way he called the wedding his investment, the fact that I'd been living in his home, cooking his meals, and building his dreams, while slowly losing mine. He never thought I'd walk away, and he definitely never thought I'd outmaneuver him. But I didn't need a spotlight or a courtroom. All I needed was time, and a reason. Now I had both. The funny thing about planning your escape is how invisible it can be when done right. On the surface, nothing changed. I still made dinner, still folded his laundry, still watched the same Netflix shows on the couch like everything was fine. But inside, I was done pretending. I wasn't his fiancé anymore. I was a strategist wearing soft eyes and quiet lips. And he had no clue. What I needed now was leverage. Something concrete. Something I could take to the bank. Literally. The mortgage had one key flaw. It was adjustable. His rate was about to spike in 5 months unless he refinanced. And based on what I'd seen, he didn't have the credit or the discipline to handle it. That was my opening. I waited for him to mess up. It didn't take long. One morning, I noticed an envelope stuffed in the junk drawer. It was a notice. He'd missed a second payment. He hadn't even opened it. He was always so confident the world would wait for him to catch up. It wouldn't. I started building my portfolio. Printouts, bank screenshots, copies of tax statements, everything with his name and his debts. I wasn't trying to ruin him. Not yet. I just needed the option. Around this time, the wedding planning started to feel like theater. He wanted a destination ceremony, 5-star resort, open bar, 150 guests. I asked about the budget, and he said, "Don't worry about it, I've got it handled." Handled how? He was skipping mortgage payments, but wanted to rent beachfront villas and fly out groomsmen who hadn't texted him in years. I stopped asking questions and started documenting everything. The cost estimates, the deposits, his reckless promises. I let him think I was thrilled, that I trusted him. I played the perfect bride, because the better the performance, the less he'd see the trap being set around him. Then one night, I came home late from work. I found him drunk on the couch, glass of whiskey in hand, ranting about how I didn't appreciate how much pressure he was under. He said, "I'm the one providing here. You just show up." Show up? I paid half the bills, covered groceries when he came up short, managed the house, kept us afloat when his freelance checks came late, and I just showed up? He passed out before I could respond. And I'm glad, because what I would have said out loud, would have blown the whole plan. Instead, I just stared at him sleeping, snoring, mouth open, completely unaware that he'd just given me the final push I needed. From that night forward, I operated like a ghost with a clipboard. I called in favors, had secret meetings with real estate brokers during my lunch breaks, learned every step of a mortgage assumption and title transfer. And meanwhile, he got messier. He started missing more mail, ignoring calls, throwing away notices. I'd find unopened envelopes shoved behind the TV, late fees piling up like snow. One night I asked him gently, "Hey babe, did you handle that insurance thing?" He groaned. "Ugh, don't start. I'm not a kid." I said I got it. But he didn't, and he never would. Because somewhere deep down, Marcus believed the world would bend for him. That someone, his mother, his fiancé, the bank, would clean up the mess. But not this time. I paid close attention to his patterns. The day he always stopped for drinks after work. The weekends he visited his cousin across town. The moments I had a window. That's when I started quietly moving things out of the house. First, it was a few sentimental items. My journals, my grandmother's necklace. Then came the essentials. Birth certificate, passport, documents. I opened a P.O. box, shifted my credit card statements. One by one, my life started existing elsewhere. And still, he didn't notice. In fact, the less I pushed, the more arrogant he got. He started talking about his house in front of friends again. Joked about how he'd let me stay after the wedding if I behaved. Everyone laughed, even me. But inside, I was already gone. I knew exactly what day the transfer would be triggered. I had timed it with the loan servicing schedule, matched it with a lapse in his insurance paperwork, and waited until he defaulted on a third payment, just enough to raise concern without triggering foreclosure. That's when I made my move. But I'll save the how for later. What mattered was that I never raised my voice. I never threw a fit. I never gave him a reason to suspect a thing. And by the time he realized what I'd done, the house wasn't his anymore. The week it all happened, he thought I was out shopping for bridesmaid gifts. I told him I needed a full day to handle wedding things with my maid of honor. In reality, I was sitting in a notary's office with 2 certified checks, 3 signed documents, and a very calm real estate attorney named Denise, who never once asked me why I looked like I was holding my breath the entire time. The truth was, I had spent the past 2 months preparing a legal assumption of the mortgage under a buyer's clause he didn't even know existed. The house wasn't fully paid off. It was leveraged, like everything else in his life. And because his name was the only one on the paperwork, and he had defaulted on 3 payments, the bank was open to a rescue deal. Enter me, quiet, cooperative, organized. I had built just enough credit, just enough savings, just enough trust with the loan officer from the one time I'd accidentally called about his account when he was busy at work. Marcus had no idea that by the time he poured himself a drink that night, the title transfer had already begun. He came home tipsy, sloppy, smiling, stress-free. "Babe, did you get the candles or whatever?" I nodded, smiled, kissed him on the cheek. I got everything we need. He had no clue. By the end of that week, my name was on the house. Not his, not ours, mine. I had assumed the debt, restructured the payment, locked in a new rate, and retained full ownership pending one final signature, his, which, thanks to the power of attorney clause he'd signed last year when he was too lazy to read the refinance papers I brought home, I didn't need again. That clause? Yeah, I slipped it in during a refi night. I had told him it was standard. He was watching a playoff game and barely skimmed it. "You always handle this stuff better than me," he'd said. I did. So now not only was he removed from the title, he was also removed from the narrative. I spent the next few days packing the last of my things, not because I was leaving, but because he was. I waited until Sunday. It was the one day he liked to sleep in late and do nothing. I made coffee, cleaned the kitchen, opened the blinds. It felt like spring in every way. Then I handed him an envelope and sat down across from him at the table. He looked at it like it might bite him. "What's this?" "Everything," I said. Inside was a printout of the title transfer, a copy of the mortgage reassignment, a letter from my attorney, and a formal request to vacate the property within 30 days. At first he laughed, like I was joking, like this was just some kind of dramatic stunt. "Wait, what is this? A prenup thing?" "No," I said calmly. "This is my house now, and you're not welcome here anymore." He didn't laugh after that. He stood up, started raising his voice, started using words like betrayal and manipulation, told me I was insane, that I couldn't do this, that he had rights. I didn't yell. I didn't flinch. I simply handed him one final document, a notarized copy of the power of attorney, signed by him, dated a year ago, legally granting me full control of all decisions tied to the property in the event of default, which had happened 3 times. He was speechless. "I trusted you," he said. "No," I replied. "You used me. I just stopped letting you." He didn't leave that day. He slammed doors, paced, made threats, but the wheels were already in motion. The locks were scheduled to be changed the following Monday. My attorney had already filed notice, and the police had been pre-briefed in case of escalation. I had every angle covered, because you don't play chess with a man who thinks he's still holding the board. He left 3 days before the locks changed, didn't say goodbye, didn't try to fight, just packed a few bags and vanished in the middle of the afternoon while I was at work. I know because I checked the doorbell cam. No note, no text, just a final disappearing act, like he always did when things got hard. The silence that followed was loud in the best way. No slamming drawers, no late-night drinking, no fake promises about fixing things, just space. And I filled it with peace. I repainted the living room, got rid of the ugly leather sectional he insisted on, bought a used dining table, and invited my sister over for dinner, something I hadn't done in years because Marcus didn't like company. The first time I sat alone on my new couch with a glass of wine, I didn't cry. I thought I might, but I didn't. I felt taller, not because I'd won, but because I'd stopped shrinking. Word got around, slowly. Friends started asking questions. Some took his side, some disappeared, but the ones who mattered, they saw me, really saw me. Not the girl who followed his lead, but the woman who reclaimed her ground. He sent me a message 2 weeks later, just one sentence. You really went through with it. I didn't respond. What was there to say? Yes, I went through with it, because he left me no choice. Not when he erased me from decisions, not when he mocked my presence in a home I helped maintain, not when he laughed about letting me stay like I was a tenant in my own life. No, I didn't just go through with it. I rose from it. And the thing is, I don't hate him. I'm not bitter. That would still be giving him space. What I feel is nothing. And that's the most powerful thing I've ever felt. I took a solo trip after it all. Just me, a carry-on bag, and 3 days by the water. I walked barefoot, ate when I was hungry, slept with the windows open, and every single moment I thought, this is mine. My life. My name. My peace. The wedding dress I bought, I donated it. No need for reminders. The future I thought we were building, it was never real. He built a fantasy where he was the king, and I was the placeholder queen, quiet, smiling, dependent. But I am none of those things. I am loud in the ways that matter, silent in the ways that protect me, and whole in ways he'll never get to witness again. People ask me now if I'm dating, if I've moved on. The answer is yes, just not with a person. I moved on with my dignity, my boundaries, my home. And when I walk through that front door now, I don't feel like I'm entering someone else's space. I don't brace for judgment or wait for approval. I breathe. That's the thing about vengeance. When done right, it doesn't look like fire. It looks like freedom. And mine was quiet.